So, Scott, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to join us on the podcast. It's gonna be a fun little conversation. The We met through a fractional sales management group that we belong to, and we have some similar type clients and some similar experiences. So I wondered if we could start off with what when you engage with or start having conversations with a business owner, what do you hear from them as a problem that they're trying to solve?
Well, my background is in technology, so my clients tend to be business to business companies, small to mid size. And the business owners are almost always looking at, hey, I need more leads. And the salespeople I have, I don't have a great way to, can you help me hire top notch A level salespeople? And they perceive that that's the answer to their business. A lot of times, and a
And
lot of times uh, that may be the case, but many times it's not. And I usually start an engagement with the sales QB sales best practices audit. And that gives me a great framework
okay,
to work through the sales process with the business owner. Understand first, are leads an issue? And let's take a deeper dive on that. Uh, where do their existing customers come from? How long have they had them? Do they come from a lead generation source that they've been using? Or are they really referrals that happened a couple years ago, or maybe even longer, that they really don't know where they came from? Or at least it's not top of mind, and they're not actively using that and trying to reproduce that bit of success.
so is it fair to say that they come to you with a challenge that might not necessarily be the real problem? Right? You ask some questions, peel back that onion a little bit to help them understand that their real problem is over here, and that might solve some of the other ancillary problems that they've been contemplating or thinking about.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that fair?
very often the case. I've sat down with potential prospects, and they are convinced that uh, they need better cold calling skills for their sales team. And after going through the process and taking them through what a sales process really is, and it begins well all the way out to branding the company. But let's stay focused on some of the marketing and lead gen activities, and then bringing a sales ready lead to the sales team. You're much better off looking at how do you qualify those leads and bring them to the sales team and give them something to work with rather than expecting them, the sales team, to spend a lot of their time knocking on doors, cold calling. Networking is part of any sales rep's responsibility for sure. But you really
Sure.
need to provide some good quality leads to your sales team if you expect results.
So I was just working on a blog post that talks exactly about what you just mentioned, that the that sort of handoff from a MQL, a marketing qualified
Right.
lead, to a sales qualified lead, which I was defining as something that's ready to go into a pipeline. That that qualification process, I look at it as that it should be a gate there, that the salesperson sort of has to punch in a code to be able to go through the gate, because it's not just everybody that raises their hand or everybody that opens an email or fogs a mirror is really qualified, right? I mean, they might have problems, they might not have problems that you can solve, but we really, I think that's the first thing. If they're not clear about what goes into a pipeline, your pipeline is going to be bloated and full of crap,
No,
for
no,
lack of a better
no
description.
question about it. One of the other early exercises that we go through is defining their ideal customer in terms of
Yeah. 2 or 3
demographics, in
steps
terms of
back, right?
having budget, in terms of are they in the right areas and are they qualified? Um, you don't want to you don't want to be too selective about it, but you got to be. All we have is time, and time is our biggest resource. So you really, as a business owner, you want to help them be selective on where they need to focus their resources, resources being marketing and lead generation activity, but then where they want their salespeople to focus. So that's an early part of the process in establishing a quality sales process is defining an ideal customer, and then making sure that the salespeople understand it and can help qualify that opportunity for the salesperson's time, and then of course the company's resources.
Sure. And one of the things when we look at an ideal, we call it an ideal client profile, and then we develop a positioning statement for that salesperson to use to speak to that ideal target, that ideal prospect. In we spend some time on helping them understand how to talk to that person, right? And it's not features and benefits. It's about addressing using their words, their vernacular, what's important to that decision maker, to get their attention. What I find is that the smaller the business, the harder that is to help them understand, help to get them to even recognize that that's a problem. Have you experienced any of that where it's just hard to get them to see that we need to meet that customer, that prospect where they are, not where we want them to be?
Yeah, I do see that, and it can be a couple different reasons. I think sometimes the smaller the business, the more opportunistic they will be, and I think the more susceptible they are to be taken in different directions. As the business grows, you develop either by necessity or just by being in a great niche. You develop some focus, and you develop a sense that a customer or a group of customers or a market segment is where you want to stay and where you want to position your resources. So I think I do see that.
Yeah, I hadn't looked at it from that lens before. So once you identify the problems, you get in there and you put a process together. And we're skipping over some steps, but I'm curious as to how you address. You found them. They found that they have a few salespeople and that they need some skills to be lifted. They need some help about how to move through that process. Can you talk a little bit about the way you do that and how you address that? Training.
Sure. The first thing I tend to do is to make sure that everyone is in sync on, we've overused the term, but on the sales process. And the way I look at that is I will work with the business owner and the sales leader to say, all right, what are the steps that you need to go through? And by the way, does your CRM reflect that? So I will try to bring CRM along with the sales process as a way of documenting it. Initially,
Do you have a preference in the CRMs that they use?
I don't. I actually have a lot of skills in Salesforce and HubSpot, but there's a bunch of others out there that we work with. So I do have a slight preference for those two, just because that's where my skills are, and those are where my team can add most value.
Got it.
So we go through that.
So
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say where I interrupted you. Where's that next step flow for you from that
So,
perspective once they have it in the CRM?
Yeah, well, having it in the CRM is probably step 2 or 3, but we use the CRM that at least that they have, or at least a first pass at it, to get through the business owner and the sales lead's view of the sales process. But then we go back and we ask the salespeople, like, what do you do every day? Do you go through these 4, 5, 6 steps? And you find that a lot of times they'll skip them, or they're adding things because well, I'll call it corporate, and these are usually small companies, but the corporate view of the sales process isn't necessarily on the money. So we go through with the sales team and we hash that out, and we get that right, and then we make sure the CRM follows that, so that the CRM is reinforcing the sales process that now everyone's agreed to, sales leadership and sales team. We're all on the same page, and then we can start getting into individual skills, and that's how I do it.
So you get them to help you understand and identify the right stages and the right steps, and then that helps you get engagement after you've put it into the CRM to use, for them to use it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. That
It is,
that
and
kind of
that's
summarize
absolutely
that?
true. It just helps in hearing the sales team say, this is how we do it, and so essentially they feel like they're driving some of the process, and they're not being told to go sit in the corner and make 20 cold calls.
Sure.
So help them. They participate in that, and then let's bring the CRM up to reinforce all the things that we need, and that way the sales team has participated in it, and we can now see when certain stages tend to be bottlenecks, and all of a sudden we've got 40 or 50 opportunities that really haven't progressed. And so why is that? Is the sales, are we qualifying it right? Do we have enough resources for the sales team to take the next step in case it's a requirements definition? Do we need to add resources to the team, for instance? Or are we not really well qualifying, and these opportunities aren't great opportunities, but somehow they've met the first couple of gates, but they're failing this third gate, so let's relook at the first couple of gates, and do we qualify them right in the first place?
Yeah, and sometimes the salesperson has to be comfortable enough to take that out of the process, disqualify it, even though it's in the pipeline. And we find that sometimes you have to give them permission to stop wasting time.
Right.
Sometimes you have to give them permission to say, this is obviously not moving, and the customer, the prospect at that point has decided not to move forward, or maybe because we didn't find a compelling reason for them. But whatever the reason is, we need to take that out, because that process is really delivering a forecast. Right? At the end of the day, that's what the CEO wants, is
That's how
a reliable forecast.
absolutely. That's how we preach. That's how you generate predictable revenue, by having a reliable forecasting process.
Yeah. And you just described the process, how you go about it. It's very, we understand what they're doing. We're able to show them some things that they're doing well, some things that they're not doing well, some things that they absolutely have to fix. That gets you credibility. You get in the door, and then you just go to work on that fractional.
It is.
Mostly, is it fractional, or you're doing some other things too, right?
I am. Thanks for bringing that up. So the lion's share of my business is fractional sales management for small to mid-sized B2B companies. But during 2020, when things got a little slow and we're all kind of cloistered in our virtual offices, I put together a lot of what we do into a half a dozen sales training programs, courses, 8 weeks, 10-week courses.
Okay.
And the state of Massachusetts, where I'm based, has a great program. It's called the Workforce Training Fund. And if your courses are qualified, by their program, companies within Massachusetts can earn anywhere up to $30,000 per year in reimbursement for these qualified courses. So it's been an additional segment of my business to do more structured training, 8 weeks of training for company specific training. So it's not that I get two people from here and one person from there. So it's not kind of your general uh, sales training or your general productivity training, which can be valuable. What I do is by company. So they can have as little as three, sometimes, well, you can go more than 10, but usually 10 is 8 to 10 is the right number. And I will do a
Right.
specific training class based on their business. And that also starts with a bit of an assessment. So we understand their value proposition and we can bring specific skills to that part of their business.
So that's interesting. The Workforce Training Fund, state-sponsored, publicly funded, I would
It
imagine?
is. It's actually funded by a small little percentage added to the payroll tax, excuse me, in Massachusetts. So the
Oh,
qualification
okay.
is that the attendees must be on payroll in the state of Massachusetts for this particular program.
And so so by that company investing in their people, which should give them retention improvement, it should give them performance improvement, and that is, do they match the dollars? Does the fund pay for all of it? Or how does that work? Because it seems
What's
like a
interesting,
no-brainer if you got a company that fits.
small to mid-sized companies, which in the state of Massachusetts, to this program, it's defined by 100 employees or less in Massachusetts. They
Okay.
qualify for 100% reimbursement up to that $30,000 limit, or 3,000
Wow.
per employee per year.
Wow.
If you,
That's a that's a hefty chunk of a training budget for a small team.
it really is, and it's
You
opened the
can,
doors to some smaller clients that couldn't afford it otherwise. Larger companies can participate, but their match is 50% of the training outlay.
yeah, but they're paying a bigger chunk of the funding for that, the tax for that. So,
Through their payroll
but that's
taxes, they
good.
are.
You're giving the little, yeah, and you're giving the little guy a fighting chance, if they wanna get better. I'm not a big fan of taxes. I'm not a big fan of government trying to facilitate that. But that seems like a thoughtful program that can actually add value to sales organization. Is the training is it not just sales training, but is it other other types of training with other aspects of a company, other
Absolutely.
departments?
It's a broad program. It has manufacturing based ISO certification training. It has QC, QA focused. So there are hundreds of courses. Mine are just six, but there's probably 500 to 700 courses that the state has approved across the board, primarily in manufacturing, supply chain, and those types of skills. That a lot of times, yeah, the small company is just doesn't have the experience and the skill base that a larger company has, and so to help them compete, I think it's a good.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good. It sounds like a well thought out program. We have something similar to that here in Michigan, but it's run through institutions, like at a university.
Oh, I see.
That it's similar. They have very specific rules about who can get what, but actually, my first client was partially funded through that program, and it. So when I started working with them, they were just getting off the ground. They were doing maybe maybe 500,000, 600,000, for in that first year, and I was working with them in the second year, and fast forward 6 years, he called me up at the end of the year last year, and he's like, "Hey, we need to double in size. Can you help?" And they want to go from 7.5 to 15 million
That's impressive.
in the next three
That's a
years.
great success story.
So it really is because that program helped them do that. Though they probably would have done it anyway, but it would have been maybe a little slower. It took more resources. They would have had to go slower to do it. But so that kind of thing works. Can you share what is it? How, is it tough to get yourself certified to be able to participate in that from a training perspective?
It is somewhat. The overriding criteria for these programs are that they're really educational based, in that you're not funding consulting.
Yeah.
That was the prime, that, so they needed to see the curriculum, they needed to see what you're presenting, and the fact that you've been presenting, that you have the material, that you're been doing this for at least 2 years. That's one of the basic criteria. So that's really how, and they were helpful in getting, because some of the submittals that I made sounded a little bit too much like consulting, and they weren't comfortable with that. So they helped me put the right kind of material together that made it work.
That's refreshing. That's a really good government program that helps you grow your business, but you can really, if you help a company get better and increase performance, that goes throughout the whole community, right? I mean, it's hard to calculate how that can really pay off for the taxpayers of Massachusetts.
It does, and it's an example of slight edge changes, slight edge improvements, where every day you're trying to get better at what I do, and I try to preach that to the companies and the salespeople I talk to, is that every day you need to get better, and at the end of the month you need to have skills or techniques or motivation that you didn't have at the beginning of the month, because all your competition is doing that. So if you're standing still,
Exactly.
people are going by you, and
Yeah, if you're standing still, you're actually falling behind,
that's right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome. I'm very I'm happy to hear that a government program works, and that's it. I'm glad they're giving the little guy a chance to get better. That's great. So, Scott, let's kind of switch gears a little bit. Sales and Cigars is the name of the podcast.
Okay.
We just talked a little bit about sales. So, do you have a relationship with cigars? I mean, how do you? I don't even know if you're a cigar smoker or not. How do they fit into your world?
Yeah, I am. I love a cigar occasionally. I'm not an avid cigar smoker. For years, I had a humidor, and I would buy some nice cigars, and then I wouldn't pay attention, and the humidor would go dry, and so when I'm looking forward
You just see
to a cigar,
money. You see money burning up.
yeah. So I'd love a cigar. Usually, when I'm out on the golf course, is when I have a cigar most often.
So it's a social thing. You're outside. We're to me, golf was always about. Usually, you're with friends. You're outside. You're getting fresh air. Maybe a cocktail or two. But it's about having a good time and being social. So, and you play golf, probably not too much in the winter in Massachusetts, but how often do you get out in the summertime?
No, we get out a couple times a week. My wife's a fantastic golfer. Our kids grew up golfing. The older one played in college, so it's
Nice.
it's a big part of what we do all summer long.
Yeah, you probably did golf vacations when your family was growing
We
up.
did, and that was the kids just we made it. That's what everyone does. So come on, and I tell you
Awesome.
it took a lot of work getting the kids going because we envisioned this idyllic golf setting where mom and dad and the two kids are out golfing and everyone's having a wonderful time, and a couple of times the kids would be sharing a cart and there'd be a fist fight and you turn around, one of the kids has a bloody nose because because he moved, the other guy caught him moving his ball or something. So there were, there's always those kinds of,
The normal trials and tribulations of any family
yeah,
vacation.
that's right. That's right.
There's a plan and then there's
Yeah, it's,
reality, and somehow the kids have a way of changing reality and bending it.
they're 30 and 33 now, so there's no more fist fights. There's usually they usually get a little more respect for dad too, because I'm the weak link. Both kids are fabulous golfers. The older one who played in college is still a scratch. My wife's the club champion at our little club, so dad comes along as long as I can bring the visa and maybe a stogie or two hidden in the golf bag will get me invited back next time.
Yeah, well, you got to know what your strengths are,
You don't know your role.
or is dirty. Well, how many strokes do they usually give you?
Well, the wife gives me.
The scratch
Yeah,
golfer. He gives you a couple of
he
strokes.
does. He gives me 3 or 4 aside.
There you go. All right. So when you're out with your buddies, not with the family, you'll have a cigar. Any good stories there before we
Well,
wrap up?
I love playing, and I usually try to keep it light because my golf game is pretty shaky. So if I get too much nicotine, it can the balls can stop flying, and that happened one time. I was playing with a good buddy, so it was a friendly match, but we had a couple of bucks riding on it, and I'm kicking his butt on the front nine, and he offers me this great dark Cuban seed Dominican kind of cigar, and so we sparked that up, and boy, my eyes opened, and about 2 holes in, I can't putt. The balls are going off the tee everywhere, and he roars back and takes the back nine and the 18, and so I try to be careful with those rugged cigars. I tend to like a lighter one.
Let me ask a question. Did your buddy, did he do that with intent, or was it just a happy accident?
No, I think
Did he know that
he
you?
knows my weakness, and he knows I was getting a little lucky on the front nine, so he had to take some corrective action.
I guess you give him credit for keeping his wits about him. That's funny. It's a good story, Scott. I appreciate that. So we're going to have, in the show notes, we'll have how to get a hold of you. The last question I'd like to ask is around the market that you serve, right? So we got listeners all over the place, and you're going to share this to your people. Do you got a geographic area that you try to stay within for your client base, or do you go all over the world?
Well, I go all over. I'm based in Boston, essentially, so the lion's share of my clients are based in Boston, but they tend to be multinational, or at least cover the U.S. pretty broadly. So that's led to relationships that are pretty Northeast focused. But
Is that because of the language barrier that people in Boston have with
yeah,
the rest of us?
that Boston accent limits me. I've been told.
The first time I was in Boston, I remember I was a kid and I didn't have a say, so we had to do one of those, tours with a bus.
Oh yeah.
And the lady that ran the bus, I don't know why I remember this. I was probably 9 years old, and she's like, "First thing I want to get straight with all of you," and I don't do a Boston accent, but she said, "First thing I want to get straight is I do not have an accent. All of you do." And I'm just like, "Wow, that's bull." And then I heard her. She had an accent. For those of us from the Midwest, it was wildly different than ours. So anyway, so you can go. Anybody hears you heard what they like what they heard, they give you a buzz, and we'll have all your contact information in the show notes. So
You bet. Love to talk to some business owners and see if I can provide some value.
all right, Scott, appreciate it. Thanks again for jumping on with us, and best of luck. Thanks.
Thanks, Walter. Appreciate the opportunity to